Cosmic lottery and luck. What does that have to do with theology? Well, recently, Tim offered multiple questions for Calvinists. Trinity Radio produced it, and there were some responses. And this question came up from Tim on cosmic lottery and luck for Calvinist determinism. Let's take a look.
According to Calvinism, God does not choose the elect based upon anything about the individual, lest any man should boast, Ephesians 2:9. So those who are passed by, the damned, and those who are elect seem to be based upon luck or chance. Indeed, in Calvinism, the elect seem to have won a cosmic and infinite lottery of sorts. Moreover, those who have been determined to hell, created for the sole purpose of eternal damnation, a decision made by God prior to the birth of the damned individuals. Well, those guys are literally the unluckiest folks in all of creation. So it seems to me that this leaves room for one to boast about how lucky they are compared to the next guy. But here's my question. If God does not choose the elect based upon anything about the person, how is their election anything but lucky?
Okay, Tim. All right, let's get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Cosmic lottery and luck. For initially, I thought I was going to earn some, or I thought I was just going to win some money here, but that's not what this is about, apparently. So a little bit disappointed. Let's say if someone responded this way to this question, they said, "How can anyone boast about being more lucky than the next guy?"
All right, watch me. I mean, suppose that that I won multiple hands of poker, Texas Hold'em or something in a row, right? And
yeah, let's do blackjack. That's more lucky than
blackjack. All right, yeah. 50 times in a row, I win blackjack, and I could do something like this. Ha ha! You're so unlucky. Everybody that's competing against me, you're so unlucky. You're so unlucky that you shouldn't even leave your house in the morning. I don't know what your problem is. You must be letting all these black cats walk in front of you or something. Or maybe you're walking under a ladder. Maybe you spilled the salt or opened an umbrella indoors. I'm not that stupid. Whatever the case might be, I'm sure glad that I'm not unlucky like you. When people tell me good luck, I respond by saying that luck is on my side. In fact, I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
There you go. That's very
so
close.
Look, I can boast. I can boast about being lucky. And I've totally heard people boast about being lucky before. But to offer this tu quoque, if that question counts as an objection from the Calvinists, let me ask, how can anyone boast about a free gift they did nothing to earn? Which is the Molinist or Arminian position. So look, if it's sauce, or if the sauce is good for the goose, then it's good for the gander. I think that's how it goes.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny to me because I have little kids and I hear them boast about their luck all the time.
Do you ever?
Like, I found a 4-leaf clover. I'm just the luckiest person. Isn't it amazing? It's like, you didn't find a 4-leaf clover. I'm like, you glued a piece of paper on that clover. There's not 4 leaves. So, so we think about that all the time. In fact, even in sports, like if a guy hits a full court shot at the buzzer, you're boasting over that luck.
That's right.
Right? Because that's more luck than effort when it just goes in at the last second, unless your name is Jokic, in which case it's not luck.
Man, that was nuts.
All right.
One time I saw Paul Pierce take a game-winning shot at the buzzer, and it was like a three-pointer or something. It was an outside shot, and it went off the glass. Clearly, he wasn't trying to go off the glass. He was trying to make a swish, right? But it went off the glass. Celtics win the game. The reporters bring him over, and they're like, "Did you call glass?" And he's like, "I called the win. I called victory." That's what it's like. He wasn't. I don't know if that's related, but that's just what it
that is. So Paul Pierce, anyway. Yeah, all right. So I heard someone reject to your claim that if Calvinists were true, then as far as those whom God has not elected, damnation is the sole purpose of their existence. Now, he claimed that this statement was stupid.
Yeah, I remember that. I saw it. Well, yeah, some Calvinists have argued that this is a purpose, if not the primary purpose of human existence. And for the damned, for the people that are going to spend eternity in hell, the purpose of their existence. For example, John Piper has written that God has a desire to save all people, but God has an even greater desire for his own glory. And thus, he's got to damn most people. He's got to send, including some babies, he's got to send them to hell so that they can suffer into the infinite future. So this is an absurd view that simply is not biblical. Now, Calvin was clear that the damned are doomed from the womb. Where are you going to spend eternity? That's the most important thing, the most important question you can answer. So this is the most important thing in life. It's heaven or hell. And according to Calvinism, God determines this most important thing prior to the person's existence. You know, before they've even had one thought, before they've committed any sins, before they've even taken one breath. God determines this about the person if Calvinism's true. So think about this. That means that the babies who die, who are not one of God's chosen prior to the foundations of the world, right? These babies that die, you know, and even, you know, Calvin said they're doomed from the womb. Suppose they die in the womb, right? They wake up on the other side of death, suffering in the eternal fires of hell. Think about that. Maybe it's a baby that gets aborted that just didn't happen to be one of God's elect, right? That baby then goes from having no intentional states of consciousness to just suffering. And come on. If that's the case, then these babies seem to be the epitome of unlucky humans. So this gets us into luck and unluck very quickly. So to answer this Calvinist who said it was stupid, it's not a stupid statement. It just exposes what's entailed by the Calvinists, by their views. So if a human is not elected based upon anything about that person, lest that person could boast, then God's choice to elect and also pass by others seems to be random. You know, definitely nothing about the people. Thus, the elect seem to have won the ultimate lottery. And those who God randomly decides to pass by and then go to hell and be separated from God for all eternity are literally the most unlucky people in any possible world.
You have to consider all of the implications of a belief system. And I think that this is definitely one of them. Now, if somebody is an annihilationist or something like that, they might have a stronger leg to stand on, because then
not much.
I said stronger. I didn't
stronger,
I didn't say a strong leg. I said
still pretty weak.
Yeah. But then you would ask the question, well, then I suppose some of these babies who are aborted, it's a good thing that they're being aborted, because then they don't have to go through life without the knowledge of who God is, and they're just annihilated right away, right? Anyway, that's
and also it's still unlucky if that's the case, because you go from just being annihilated and being separated from God and all that's good into the eternal future, whether you're conscious of that or annihilated. It's not a good outcome. It's still referred to as hell, even by the annihilationist.
Okay, so what if somebody said that your argument here that you made in the question is about causal moral luck? Is that true?
No, my argument is not about moral luck. My argument is about one's eternal location, and if one is going to suffer into the eternal future without end or be annihilated, or if one is going to flourish in paradise into the infinite future, right? Are you going to be separated from God and all that is good into the infinite eternal future, or are you going to flourish in paradise into the infinite eternal future? That's what it's about. It's your location, your eternal location, right? That's what I'm talking about. Are you going to be with God in paradise or not? And again, my question is specific. If God does not choose the elect based upon anything about the person, how is their election anything but luck? It sure seems lucky to me, and the damned seem to be extremely unlucky. So, I don't know. I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose someone would say, well, it's not lucky because God is doing the determining or choosing or whatever.
Yeah,
But
but he's not.
it seems
He,
to be pretty lucky to be in the midst of that determination compared to the other people. It's not like God. We don't know the reason God chose every person. We just know that He did, and that He's determined to do that since the foundation of the world.
Yeah.
So it does just seem kind of like a lottery,
Mm-hmm.
a cosmic lottery pick, right?
Yeah.
So there's one particular person that claims that this is not merely a problem for Calvinists, but it's also a problem for Molinists like you. So this is something that has been said.
Yeah.
Said all Christians face a constitutive moral luck problem. So first, clear it up for me. Is this another example of the tu quoque fallacy? And second, are they right?
Is that constitutive?
I'm sorry. Yeah, constitutive.
Is that what? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was your question then?
Yeah. Sorry. Is it another example of the tu quoque fallacy?
Yeah.
And are they right?
Right. So, as J.P. Moreland and I explained in our paper, all positions have luck problems, right? Some, however, are way worse than others. And so, with eternal destinies in mind, it seems to me that Calvinism has the worst luck problems of all of them. But let's quickly discuss this constitutive moral luck. Constitutive moral luck refers to the idea that a person can be morally praised or blamed for traits, dispositions, or personality characteristics that are shaped by factors beyond their control, such as their genetics or their upbringing or their social environment. So, for example, if someone is naturally courageous or kind because of their upbringing or their genetic makeup, they might be morally praised for acting courageously or kindly. However, since they didn't choose to have those traits, this raises the problem of whether they should truly be held morally responsible for actions that flow from traits they didn't choose to develop. So these so-called moral traits are determined by antecedent conditions sufficient to necessitate the mental and physical actions of this passive cog known as the person. Constitutive moral luck challenges the idea that moral responsibility requires control over one's character and actions. Now, if moral assessment depends on qualities that are shaped by luck or antecedent necessity, it raises questions about the fairness of moral praise and blame. Now, with all that said, this is not a problem for Molinists for two reasons. First, my question had nothing to do with morality. It has everything to do with who is being tortured into the infinite future and who is experiencing pleasure and paradise into the infinite future. On Calvinism, as I noted, those whom God chooses to save are not saved because of anything about that person, lest one could boast, right? Thus, if it's not anything about them, then they seem to have won a cosmic lottery. And the damned are the most unlucky people God could have created. So that's the first problem. Second, I heard one of these guys who made this objection, and look, he's committing the tu quoque fallacy again and attacks Molinism, which is not on trial at the moment, right? I'm simply going after Calvinism. So to then say, well, if it's true for me, it's also true for you. Or if it's a problem for me, it's also a problem for you. That's a fallacy. But be that as it may, views that affirm libertarian freedom or the libertarian freedom of humanity, such as Molinists and open theists and Arminians, they don't have the same problems when it comes to constitutive moral luck. Now, it's true that based on nature and nurture, we do develop certain personality types that have a strong influence on us. But we should not confuse strong influence with antecedent necessity, right? These are two different philosophical ideas that I've found that Calvinists often conflate. So with that in mind, I've definitely got a certain personality type. I'm a type 3 on the Enneagram scale, if anybody's wondering, right? My wife, Tia, she's a type 8, so that leads to a lot of fun and a lot of fights. But we've learned how to work around those personalities, those different personalities. But speaking of the Enneagram, some people think that the Enneagram is bad. I'm not convinced about that, but I think it's pretty accurate. But they say the Enneagram says, I guess, that my wife and I technically are not compatible with one another, and that would be true if my wife and I did not possess libertarian freedom and the power to take our thoughts captive and the power to take our feelings captive to obey Christ. Right? We've had to work hard on this stuff. So these are heavy influences on us, but because we have libertarian freedom, we can choose to take those feelings and even our personality types captive. We can take them captive to obey Christ. Sometimes it's hard. That doesn't mean it's always easy, right? It's usually pretty hard, but you can do it. And the more you do it, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. Be that as it may, just because one is more inclined to be angry, since he or she has the power to take their thoughts and feelings captive to obey Christ, they do not have to sin in their anger. As scripture tells us, this sin is not necessitated by their personality type. And that's what separates humanity from the animals. In fact, any Bible-believing Christian should affirm this much based upon 1 Corinthians 10:13. So while it might be harder for a type 8 to not sin in their anger, it's completely possible for them to take the way of escape God promises to provide and not sin in their anger. And that's why the American justice system has prisons, right? And we don't check to see what number they are on the Enneagram scale before sentencing them to prison because they murdered another person or any other crime, right? They're just guilty of the crime no matter what personality type they have. So if Ed is true, on the other hand, God determines the person who sins in their anger to sin in their anger, and they cannot do otherwise. Thus, it's logically impossible for them to do otherwise and take any so-called way of escape that scripture talks about or that God supposedly provides. So the circumstantial luck one finds themselves in on Molinism or any other libertarian freedom permitting view does not necessitate all of one's physical and mental actions. All of their false metaphysical beliefs or their eternal destinies. Those things aren't determined. So anyway, things like personality types are heavy influences. Nature and nurture are influences, but they are not antecedent conditions sufficient to necessitate all of my thoughts, all of my beliefs, all of my feelings, and all of my actions.
That's good. That's good. To take this even to the naturalistic angle, I once heard an atheist describe the fact that we didn't have any free will with the fact that nobody's really guilty of murder,
right?
Because they are just doing and reacting and responding. But we should still have prisons because we have to take people who doesn't have the free will not to kill and sequester them off from society so that humans can flourish.
Mm-hmm.
It was bizarre. I can't remember who it was. It was a well-known atheist, and I can't remember exactly who it was.
I've heard that before too. But notice, even they say, well, we should still sequester them. Well, what do you mean by should? You're either determined to do that or not. So should start to get really hard to understand on deterministic views.
Yeah. Smuggling in that libertarian language. All right, so
right.
All right, let's get technical. How about that? Or at least it feels technical to me. What about the Molinism and the Transworld damned? Some people have raised that as a problem for you and your view. Is it a problem?
Yeah, I've already dealt with this in the academic literature. Actually, I co-authored an academic journal article responding to the hiddenness objection offered by John Schellenberg. So this same essay is the one that Inspiring Philosophy, Michael Jones, appealed to in his debate against the apostate Tyler Vela recently. And so this essay that I wrote addresses this issue. Yes, there is some luck involved on every view, right? No view is exempt, right? There's luck problems for every view. But as I said, some are far worse than others here. On my view, I'm just as lucky as Captain America was in the Avengers movie or movies, Infinity War and Endgame, right? In a sense, Captain America was lucky that there was that one feasible freedom permitting world that Doctor Strange could actualize. And Doctor Strange was, you could say that he was somewhat lucky that there was one world in which the evil of Thanos was defeated and all the Avengers were raised from the dead and the evil of Thanos was crushed under their feet. But yeah, I mean, there's luck problems all the way around. So on my view, God is also lucky in the sense that there was at least one feasible freedom permitting world available that was compatible with a maximally great being's perfect nature. If not, then I contend that the perfect triune God would not have chosen to create life at all. I argue that state of perfection and triune aseity without creation is you can't improve upon that. But we also can't say that ultimate ontological reality got worse by creating. Now, I think it could have, but this world, as I write in my journal article with Jacobus Erasmus, we wrote, for all we know, God created the one feasible freedom permitting world in which evil is ultimately defeated and all who are not transworld damned are saved. So to reiterate what I just said, on my personal view, I contend that if this world did not exist, then God would not have created at all. Fortunately, this one feasible freedom permitting world was actualizable by the maximally great being. And so I'm lucky in that sense. So if this is the case, and the God of middle knowledge would know if this world is available to create or not, then Hitler is not saved in some other feasible freedom permitting world. So problem avoided there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. All right, so what if someone said this with the deterministic view? Well, by definition, it cannot be lucky if a deity determines it because it's not random chance. So it's not luck.
Yeah, but God's choice about who is not going to suffer into the infinite future is not based upon or grounded in anything about the person, lest they could boast on the Calvinistic ed view. Thus, the grounding problem seems to be lucky there.
So this is a grounding objection to your view. But what if somebody said, like, okay, well, does that mean God had to get lucky in order to create? Is that what you're saying? Like, God doesn't have any of his own sovereignty then, right? He just had to, oh, good. There's one available world to me that I can actualize. Thank goodness. Otherwise, well, I don't know who to thank because I'm God.
Thank myself.
But, yeah.
No.
So I'm lucky that I got to choose this one.
Yeah, no, he'd be perfectly fine and perfectly perfect without creation. God doesn't need creation, doesn't need us. And God's, prior to creation, I like to refer to this as the Kalam state. So if you run the Kalam cosmological argument and you get back to what the creator of the universe was prior to creation, God, the triune God in that state is in a the state of aseity. I call it triune aseity, where God has perfect relationship with the other members of the Trinity. It's a perfect relation. If it's perfect, creation is not needed. But the fact is, so look, if God were going to create in that state, that state has to be on the top shelf, right? So there's a whole bunch of worlds that are on these lower shelves that he would just never even think about creating. He could create a world in which everybody was Hitler, or where everybody was like Hitler, right? Or he could create a world where humans don't exist, but just giraffes exist, or so, you could create all kinds of different worlds. He could create non-life permitting worlds. He could create universes in which planets don't exist. I mean, just do the fine-tuning argument. And when you start to do the fine-tuning argument, you see all these other different possible worlds that are not just that God could have created, but are more probable than our life permitting world, unless there's an intelligent designer there. So there's all kinds of different possible worlds God could create. And so I'm saying, so why does he pick this one? And I say, well, it's probably because this is the one feasible freedom permitting world. And by the way, that free will is vital. This libertarian freedom is vital for us to be rational agents, moral agents, so that we can love. I say that true love, or the best kind of love, can't exist if God determines all of our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions, right? We're just puppets then. We're going to talk about that more soon. But we're not in a true love relationship, or at least the best kind of love relationship with our Creator, which is what God wants. After all, the greatest commands, Jesus' two greatest commands, is to love God, right? Love each person of the Trinity and love each person the Trinity's ever created. Life is all about love, and that's the mark we're supposed to hit. And to miss that mark, which is the definition of sin, is when we fail to love God and others.
Let's say there is a world in which God could create where everything is determined, that he determines everything, who's going to believe him or not. So he could do that. And then there's a world that he creates that says, I'm actually going to create a world where people freely choose me, even though I know what they're going to choose. And he, not because he doesn't have the power to create both of those, but he knows that those are two options, and he says, actually, the one that brings me most glory is the one with the freedom permitting world.
Right.
That's what I'm going to create. Yeah. So it's not like he lucked into creating this world.
No, he didn't have to.
Yeah. He just knew this is what brings me the most glory. Am I tracking with you?
Yes.
That? Okay.
I mean, what brings God the most glory? When the most amount of people love him in return. And for the best kind of love, you got to have libertarian freedom. God doesn't want relationships with puppets or robots, even if they're conscious. I always get those words mixed up.
Yeah.
Right. So he wants real relationships with rational, moral agents who can love him in return. So,
which means he limits himself to some capacity, right?
Yes.
It's not that he can't determine, it's that he chooses not to in those instances, so that real love can be actualized. Right?
Amen to that. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm on the right track. I got the Tim Stratton seal of approval there. Okay.
You got it. Yeah.
Not many people want it, but I got it.
Yeah, I don't know. You got it. I don't know if you want it, but you got it.
All right. I think that pretty much wraps up this. Any closing thoughts with this one?
Yeah, just I know that it's tricky because it does, when I say God was lucky in a sense, so don't take that too far. It's like when Dr. Craig said, well, God has to play the cards he's been dealt. And people freak out about that. I'm like, look, that's a manner of speaking, right? He doesn't really have cards being dealt to him, right? There's not some cosmic card dealer out there. But once you factor in, once God decides that he's going to create free creatures so that true love and rationality can exist, and so he can have the best kind of relationships with those created in his image, then once he factors in human libertarian freedom, the amounts of worlds he can create at that point are very limited. And some of those worlds are going to have a lot of pain, evil, and suffering. And I say the world with the best end game, the best eternal end game, since God has middle knowledge, he knows the end game. So the world with the best eternal end game also had a lot of pain, evil, and suffering in it for a finite time. And that finite time, even if it's 1,000,000 years of suffering, that's going to be just engulfed by infinity. And so for those of us living and reigning with him into the infinite future, we'll always remember what pain, evil, and suffering was like. We'll always remember how stupid it was to sin. We'll always remember what we learned from the pain, evil, and suffering in this life in our few decades on this planet. But it will be almost as if it never happened into the infinite future. But we'll still remember it. We'll still have learned from it. And I think that's why Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4:17, he says, these light momentary afflictions prepare us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. And I think that's the best way to make sense of Paul's words in 2 Corinthians.
And I think that's the best way to end here. So from all of us at FreeThinking Ministries, please join us. You can go to freethinkingministries.com/donate. You can become a part of the team. And if you haven't subscribed, what are you doing? Please subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you can be notified when our next episode and answering questions for Calvinists comes up. And as we always say here at FreeThinking Ministries,
stay reasonable.